In the summer of 1993, a robot the size of a shoebox crawled 200 feet up a shaft inside the Great Pyramid that hadn't been touched by a human hand in 4,500 years. The shaft was barely 8 inches wide. At the end of it, the robot's headlights caught a slab of polished white limestone, sealed into the passage like a door, with 2 worked copper pins fixed to its face. Someone had closed this shaft off deliberately, from the inside, thousands of years ago, and then it sat there, forgotten, until a machine finally reached it. That door is real. It's still sealed. And in the 3 decades since, 2 more robotic missions and an entirely different kind of physics experiment have added new pieces to the puzzle without ever fully solving it. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what's been found behind that door, what was discovered floating in solid stone elsewhere in the pyramid using technology borrowed from particle physics, and why, after 4 robots and 30 years, both discoveries are still sealed shut. Subscribe before we go in, because every part of this story is real, documented, and still, genuinely, unfinished. Start with where this door actually sits, because the layout matters. The Great Pyramid was built for the pharaoh Khufu around 2500 BCE, rising to roughly 480 feet, the tallest human-made structure on Earth for nearly 4,000 years. Inside it are 3 known chambers, an unfinished room cut into the bedrock below the base, the so-called Queen's Chamber in the pyramid's core. And higher up, the King's Chamber, lined in red granite, connected to the others by the Grand Gallery, a soaring corridor with a steeply sloped ceiling. From both the King's and Queen's chambers, narrow shafts run out into the body of the pyramid, only about 8 inches square. Far too small for a person to pass through. The 2 shafts from the King's Chamber run all the way to the pyramid's outer surface, which supported the long-standing explanation that these were simple ventilation shafts. That explanation held for a long time, right up until researchers looked more closely at the equivalent shafts from the Queen's Chamber, and found they don't reach open air at all. They run up into the stone and simply stop, sealed inside solid rock. A ventilation shaft that connects to nothing isn't ventilating anything, which left researchers with a real open question. What were these channels actually for? It gets stranger with the angles. Researchers studying the King's Chamber shafts found they align, with real precision, toward specific stars as they would have appeared over Giza around the time of construction. The southern shaft toward the belt of Orion, a constellation the Egyptians closely associated with their god of rebirth and the afterlife, and the northern shaft toward the circumpolar stars the Egyptians called the imperishable ones, since they never set below the horizon. So these are precisely aimed architectural features, cut through millions of tons of stone, and 2 of the equivalent shafts. From the Queen's Chamber, dead end inside the rock, hidden behind sealed openings nobody could see from either chamber. For decades, they were simply too narrow to investigate. No person could fit an arm past the wrist into them, so the mystery just sat there, acknowledged and unsolved. That changed because of a German robotics engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink. In the early 1990s, working with the German Archaeological Institute on an unrelated, practical problem, improving airflow for the increasing number of tourists inside the pyramid, Gantenbrink built a small tracked robot to inspect the King's Chamber shafts. He named it Upuaut, after an ancient Egyptian god whose name translates to Opener of the Ways. The King's Chamber shafts checked out as expected, running straight through to daylight. Then Gantenbrink turned the robot toward the sealed, unexplained shafts of the Queen's Chamber, and what started as a maintenance inspection became something else entirely. The robot climbed the southern shaft, a passage rising at more than 30 degrees, forcing the machine to grip the walls as it went past bends, past a section where the floor and walls shift unevenly for more than 200 feet, roughly 63 meters into the solid core of the pyramid. Then, the headlights hit a wall. Not the rough end of an unfinished tunnel, a deliberately placed slab of fine white Tura limestone, the same premium stone Egyptians reserved for their most important surfaces, fitted perfectly to seal the shaft. And mounted to its face, 2 small copper fittings, spaced like handles, one broken, one worn smooth from something, at some point, touching it. Copper was a genuinely precious material in Khufu's era. Nobody fits deliberate copper hardware to a slab 200 feet inside an 8-inch shaft that no living person was ever expected to reach unless that slab meant something. The footage went public in 1993 and made global headlines. People started calling it Gantenbrink's door. And the obvious question, what's behind it, has never gone away since. Gantenbrink tried the twin northern shaft too, but pulled the robot back after it hit a sharp bend, judging the risk of losing the machine permanently too high. That northern shaft carries its own small, older mystery. Back in the 1800s, an engineer named Wayneman Dixon had discovered the hidden shaft openings and reached in as far as a human arm could go, pulling out 3 objects: a small stone ball, a 2-pronged bronze hook, and a fragment of wood. That wood has since been dated to a period consistent with the pyramid's construction, meaning these weren't later additions, they were left by the original builders, for reasons nobody has definitively explained. After Gantenbrink's discovery, disputes over authority and publicity rights shut the project down, and the door sat sealed and unexamined for nearly a decade. It got its second visit in 2002, when an American robotics team partnered with National Geographic to send a new robot, called Pyramid Rover, up the same southern shaft, broadcasting the attempt live to a global television audience. This time the plan was to go further, drilling a small hole through Gantenbrink's door itself and threading a fiber optic camera through the gap. Millions of people watched in real time as the camera pushed through the stone into a space sealed for over 4,000 years. What it found wasn't a chamber, a coffin, or an answer. A few centimeters behind the first door sat a second door, another sealed limestone slab, blocking the way again. The broadcast ended on a genuine anticlimax that only deepened the question: why build one hidden door and then build a second one directly behind it? The investigation didn't end there either. Egypt's antiquities authorities commissioned a more advanced robot, developed by an international engineering team and named Jetty, after the magician ancient texts describe Khufu consulting. Unlike earlier machines limited to looking straight ahead, Jetty carried a bendable micro-snake camera that could be threaded through the drilled opening and curled sideways, backward, up, and down, able to see surfaces no previous camera could reach. In 2011, Jetty's snake camera curled around and looked at the reverse side of Gantenbrink's door for the first time, and found 2 things that reframed the entire mystery. First, the copper pins, which for 2 decades had been visible only from the front, turned out on their hidden side to be bent into neat, deliberate loops, genuine craftsmanship, not simple mechanical fittings, worked with care onto a surface their makers knew would be sealed in total darkness forever. The back of the door itself was smoothly finished, not roughly plugged. Both faces had clearly mattered to whoever built it. Second, and more striking, pointed down toward the floor of the small space behind the door, Jetty's camera picked up markings painted in red ochre, undisturbed for over 4,000 years. Specialists who studied the shapes concluded they weren't a mystical inscription, but matched a known Egyptian system of construction notation, working notes used on building sites. The leading interpretation of the specific marks reads as the number 121, which in ancient Egyptian cubits corresponds closely to the actual measured length of the shaft itself, suggesting a builder or foreman recorded the tunnel's length before it was sealed. That's a genuinely grounded, plausible reading. It also doesn't fully resolve the mystery, since a simple measurement note doesn't obviously require 2 finely worked ceremonial limestone doors and decorated copper fittings to protect it, which is exactly why researchers are honest that the shaft's full purpose is still debated, likely symbolic or religious in nature, tied to the king's journey into the afterlife, rather than evidence of any hidden treasure or chamber. There's no physical evidence supporting more dramatic claims like a secret burial or power source behind the door, but even the grounded explanation is genuinely remarkable. It means the builders engineered, aimed, and sealed these passages with enough precision that modern robotics can barely reach their end, and recorded details about the work they never expected any living person to read again. That's everything found inside tunnels we already knew existed. The next discovery came from somewhere nobody knew was there at all, and it wasn't found by a robot crawling through a shaft. It was found by particles falling out of the sky. In 2015, an international collaboration called Scan Pyramids began using a technique called muon tomography. Muons are subatomic particles constantly raining down through the atmosphere, produced when cosmic rays strike the upper air. They pass through solid matter, but dense stone absorbs more of them than empty space does so by placing detectors in and around the pyramid and counting muons arriving from every direction over an extended period. Researchers can build up a picture of where the interior is solid and where it's hollow, essentially X-raying the monument using cosmic radiation as the light source. To guard against a false signal, the project used 3 independent detector technologies, run by separate teams from Japan and France, each blind to the other's results if all 3 saw the same hollow shape from different angles. It was real. And they did. All 3 detected a region where far more muons were passing through than solid stone should allow. In November 2017, the results were published in the journal Nature, a large void above the Grand Gallery, at least 30 meters long, comparable in cross-section to the Grand Gallery itself, one of the largest features found inside the pyramid. Sealed off from every known passage or chamber, the first major new structure identified inside the Great Pyramid in over a century. It's been called the Big Void ever since. The same technique later identified a second anomaly, this one more precisely located, behind the pyramid's north face, tucked directly behind a distinctive chevron pattern of stones that had puzzled researchers for years. Follow-up measurements, published in Nature Communications in 2023, confirmed a corridor roughly 9 meters long, about 2 meters wide and 2 meters tall, sealed and previously completely unknown. 2 confirmed hidden voids, one large enough to be described as airliner-sized, one a smaller sealed corridor, both real, both published in leading peer-reviewed journals, both located using cosmic particles rather than any physical excavation, and both, to this day, completely unentered. The most widely favored explanation for the larger void is structural, a relieving space built to redistribute the enormous weight of stone above the Grand Gallery, protecting it from collapsing under its own mass. That's a reasonable, well-supported engineering explanation. But it's honestly still just the leading theory, not a confirmed fact, because nobody has ever actually been inside to check. There's no known passage leading to it, and no plan currently in place to create one. So here's where all of this actually leaves us, laid out plainly. A sealed limestone door, 200 feet inside a shaft that leads nowhere, fitted with worked copper hardware finished on a face meant never to be seen. A second door sealed directly behind the first. A builder's measurement, quite possibly, painted onto a floor that's been dark for over 4,000 years. And 2 confirmed hollow spaces elsewhere in the monument, one enormous, discovered only because scientists learned to read shadows cast by particles from deep space, with no physical way in that anyone has found yet. Every one of these was deliberately concealed by the people who built this monument, and every one of them, despite 4 different robots and 1 entirely new branch of applied physics, remains exactly as sealed today as it was when it was closed. What's genuinely extraordinary here doesn't require any wild leap. It's simply this. The builders of the Great Pyramid engineered, aimed, and sealed architectural features with a level of precision our most advanced tools can barely reach the end of, 4,500 years later, using copper, rope, and enormous coordinated human effort. Behind Gantenbrink's door sits a second door nobody has opened. Above the Grand Gallery sits a void the length of a football field that nobody has entered. Behind the north face, a sealed corridor waits in total darkness. Every attempt so far has reached the threshold, looked in as far as the equipment allowed, and stopped. If a building this thoroughly studied for 2 centuries can still be hiding sealed rooms nobody has ever walked into, there's another mystery just like it waiting on screen right now.